Now we're going to take a look at lesson 4.2 for each loops. So in this lesson, we're going to learn about a new kind of loop that works especially with lists. We're going to learn about the for loop, the for each loop, the for each clause, and the loop variable. So a for loop is a loop that runs an exact number of times. We've only had while loops before, and while loops run an unknown number of times. There are two types of for loops, a for each loop and a for range loop. So comparing a for each or a for loop versus a while loop, a for loop runs for a finite number of times versus a while loop runs an indefinite amount of times. So let's talk about a for each loop first. So this is a loop that examines every item in a list. It's like a while loop. Like while loops, it repeats a block of code, and for each lets us do the same thing to each item in a list. It examines one list item each loop iteration. At iteration 0, it looks at what's at index 0, which is the square. And then the next iteration, it looks at the circle, then the triangle, then the circle again. So each iteration loop is going one by one through the list. All right, so the for each clause, this is the start of a for each loop. Similar to how we have a while clause and an if clause, this is just the syntax of how do we start a for each loop. It starts with the keyword and it ends with a colon, and it has an indented block beneath it or underneath it that is the then block. So the syntax for writing a for each loop is this: for var in list colon. So list is the name of your list, var is called the loop variable, and var is the variable name you make up. Var should be some word that describes the item in your list. And let's take a look at this syntax again, because it may actually look familiar. If you remember from lesson 3.4, we started talking about event loops and how we're able to listen events now. If you recall, the syntax for that is for events in pygame.event.get colon. That is exactly what we're doing here with the for each loop, because what we learned earlier with the event loop, that's technically a for each loop. We just called it specifically an event loop earlier. So now that we know about a for each loop, it's for a name of a variable you can make up in the name of your list, and that goes through every item in the list. So let's go and try this out. If you take a look at this program right here, you run it right now, it'll ask if you like certain foods, and it'll say you have a good taste. So what we want to do is, before this first print over here, what we're going to do is add in a for each loop, and we're going to say for food in fave foods colon. Fave foods is the list that is created up here on line 8. And we don't want to run it yet because we're going to have an error. So the thing we want to talk about next is the loop variable. This is a variable that changes through every iteration of the loop. This is a variable named in the clause. In each iteration, this variable has a new value. The value becomes the current item in the list. So in this example, we loop through the list of my letters. So my letters is created up here, contains A, B, and C. And then the loop variable here is letter. So for letter, okay, and my letters is the list. This is the name that we're going to make up. We could have made it anything we wanted to, but we want to make sure it makes sense for a singular item in that list. So for each letter in the list of my letters, we're going to print that letter out. Okay, so let's finish this out. So letter has a different value depending on the iteration of the loop. The first time, at iteration 0, the letter is A. Then at iteration 1, it's B. Then at iteration 2, it becomes C. So what we want to do in our code here is we want to indent everything below this for loop. So that every item in this list of favorite foods, we ask the question of, do you like this food? We're going to prompt them, do you like it, yes or no? And if they say yes to it, we're going to say, you have good taste. So this is what's going to happen now for every item in the food list instead of just that first one. Something we had to do to change that, to make that work, is we got to change this first print to, instead of be like, do you like favorite foods at choice? We're going to say, do you like favorite foods? Instead of favorite foods at choice, we can just say food, because food is that singular item in the list. So it'll ask, do you like French fries? Do you like veggie lo mein? And so on. All right, so now let's run this. We'll get asked every type of food and if we like it or not. Yes, I like fries. No, not quite. Yes. Yes. You know, good taste. So we've now gone through every single item in the list because this is a for each loop. For every item in that list, we're going to do every piece of code here. All right. So that's all we have for this lesson. In summary, we learned about the for each loop, where we go through every item in the list. That's what a for each loop is good for, is to go through every item in the list and do some code on it. So, and we name this variable here is what we name it to be whatever we want it to be, but it should make sense if it's a singular version of what's in the list. And then this is the list that we're going through. And then as we go through the list, we can use that variable we created here in certain places if we need it. And all this code gets repeated for every item in that list. All right, so go ahead and turn that in, and we'll work on the coding techniques next.